Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here, and today we're going to be doing our meta deck tier list for B1 for Mega Rising. Now, we haven't done a tier list in quite some time, so what I've done today is compiled 24 of the most popular, the most common decks so far since this new season has been released. And, you know, a lot of people ask me, like, what is the criteria for this tier list? I think that this is going to be just an overall quality deck tier list, mostly about the positioning of these decks in the metagame. This isn't going to be just ranking decks based off of their performance at our tournament this past weekend. There's a lot of other factors that go into, you know, it's the deck's placements on the tier list. We're going to be factoring all of the metadata from this like first 5 or 6 days of the format, results from not only our tournament, but other tournaments, big and small, and in general, what I kind of feel like the positioning of these decks are. So this is going to be how highly I would rank these decks in terms of, you know, which ones I would choose to play, given the current, you know, meta landscape and how quality the decks are. I will say that I've tested and played basically everything on this tier list personally, and I've reviewed all of the data pretty extensively. So I'm excited to dive right into it. This might be, again, another longer video, but if you guys haven't seen Meta Monday yesterday, go check that out. That's definitely going to have a lot of insights about these deck lists and sort of how they did at our tournament this past weekend. Speaking of tournaments, we have the Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament number 7, Mega Mayhem. This is the 7th tournament of the series, the 2nd tournament since Mega Rising has been released. Last tournament was a massive success. It was a whole lot of fun. Sponsored by Box.gg. Again, we have, of course, $250 in the prize pool. This will be Saturday, November 8th at noon. I would highly recommend that you guys go and register. Registration is open right now. Definitely go and check it out. Any information that you might need, you can go ahead to our Discord server and get some information about how to play, how to register. But I would definitely recommend it. Link down in the description below, as well as probably in the comment section. All right, let's just dive right into it. These videos are definitely a little bit more, you know, it's more of like a podcast type feel, you know what I mean? We just kind of press record and we just get into it. No particular order here, right here, like as I said, we have 24 of the most played decks. Some of these might be a little bit more common than others. If there's anything that you think is missing off this tier list, comment about it down below and what rank you would put these decks in. And if you agree or disagree with anything, you know, go ahead and let me know down in the comment section below as well. Okay, so yeah, let's just go in order. You know, again, these are very candid videos, and I have a lot of fun doing tier lists. I'm excited because I haven't really had the opportunity to do a tier list in quite some time. We just really haven't had a lot of new decks, so there hasn't really been a reason to do so, but the meta has changed drastically, so let's dive right into this, guys. First off is going to be the Mega Absol deck with Oricorio. This is really just what I call Absol control, and I think that this deck list has been performing very, very well ever since it you know, entered the metagame. I think that the you know, the success of this deck really does I guess it's really based around the popularity and the success of Blaziken upon release. I think that everybody was really interested in playing that like Entei Blaziken combo deck, or really just, you know, Mega Blaziken in general. And I think a lot of people were definitely excited and realized that would be a very, very strong deck list. And then the reason I made a video a couple of days ago before the tournament about Mega Absol and Oricorio was because, to me, it was sort of that one control type deck that really did have a favorable matchup into Blaziken. And I think the success of this deck has been really based around that from the very beginning. So far, this is the 2nd most played deck of the metagame so far, almost tied with Mega Blaziken and Entei, which is pretty crazy, about 10% of the meta share. The average win rate so far this season of this deck list has been very impressive, about a 56% win rate. Again, I really think that Oricorio kind of carries a lot of different decks early on in the metagame. I think that, you know, most people don't really know the best way to build their deck around also countering Oricorio, and when you play a deck like Mega Absol with Oricorio, even though they don't necessarily synergize very well, they just sort of lead into each other very well, right? So the delaying of the game that Absol can provide really allows you to kind of set up Absol and deal maybe a little bit of chip damage, and really kind of set up a board state that's very difficult to deal with. Absol doesn't deal a ton of damage, doesn't have a ton of HP, but the effect is quite strong that discards the supporter card. So if we're able to really drag out the game and then do some chip damage with Oricorio, coming into Mega Absol, especially against other Mega Pokemon, it can be a very, very, very strong strategy, and a big reason why I think this deck has been successful is because of its matchup into Entei and Mega Blaziken. So what I am going to do here, we're going to be a little bit generous with the tier list, I think, this week, just because I think things will narrow down as time goes on. But if we take a look at the results and everything that we have available to us at this point, I think that Oricorio and Mega Absol is an S tier deck list. Not only is it one of the most played decks, but it has one of the highest win rates so far in the game. And I think that it'll continue to be relevant. Again, it might drastically decline as time goes on if Mega Blaziken sees less play and if Oricorio becomes less and less relevant. What we're seeing right now, like the big development that we're seeing right now, is the rise of Suicune Greninja. And of course, that is because Oricorio, very prominent, very strong early on in the metagame, but Suicune Greninja, of course, mainly just Greninja being very strong into Oricorio. So I think that Suicune is massively on the rise. We'll talk about it a little bit later in this video. We have 2 different Suicune decks, or 3 technically in this video, but I think that Absol and Oricorio, definitely a top tier pick right now, but I don't think it's like the best deck, but I think we're probably going to have a handful of decks here into the S tier. Next up is going to be Altaria with Jirachi, right? So this is the deck that actually won our tournament this past weekend, the largest pocket tournament in months. Narumi was playing this list, and it was a really smart deck because, you know, you're playing Chingling, you're playing Jirachi, and you're playing, of course, the Sableye, which can hit for 70 damage with Mega Altaria. This is a really nice deck, and I like this deck because going into this past weekend, it was a really smart meta call. This was an Altaria deck that had a lot of options. It could deal with other Oricorio decks fairly well, and it did not get countered by Chingling because it wasn't playing many item cards, but it was playing Chingling, which meant you were able to really counterplay a lot of the Blaziken decks that required Rare Candy to evolve into Mega Blaziken. And I think we really saw this deck perform exceedingly well. But again, what we're seeing after the tournament is sort of a rebound effect, a rubber band effect where, you know, Greninja, of course, is something that this deck necessarily doesn't love going up against with the baby Pokemon with the low HP amount of Jirachi, right? And I think that Altaria is a really, really good Mega Pokemon into other Mega Pokemon because that 130 damage is relevant because you can just 2-hit KO really any Pokemon in the game. But when Mega Altaria goes up against things like Suicune or other, you know, EX basic Pokemon from, you know, the previous era of Pokemon Pocket that have 140 or 150 HP, it oftentimes can miss KO. So you're reliant on the Chingling damage, but I think that overall, this Altaria deck is really, really strong. It's hard for me to to justify it because it did get first place, you know what I mean? But I think that honestly, when I'm looking at this deck and its positioning, I don't really love this particular deck's matchups into a lot of the other decks in the format right now that are on the rise. Again, very, very strong into Entei Blaziken. Going to be really, really strong into really any Blaziken deck, which is really strong and awesome. Also can hold its own against, you know, the Absol decks and other Altaria decks. But when you take a look at its matchups into Suicune Greninja, that is kind of where it gets a little bit dicey just because Greninja can kind of take KOs on you. And I really do think that this deck was specifically a meta call against Blaziken, and which is why I think it was a really smart choice. But I don't know if I would really consider it to be, you know, a top deck going into really the second week of the metagame. Some people might be surprised by this, but I'm actually going to put Altaria Jirachi here in the high A tier. I think that this is definitely a very high A tier deck list. In fact, we could also slot Mega Absol down into the A tier. I don't know if people are going to be necessarily super upset about that. Do I retract my statement? We got to be pretty selective with the S tier, so we'll do it as it is right now. I said I wanted to be generous, so the thing is with Altaria is that there's a bunch of different versions of Altaria, and I think that they're all really strong in their own way. So we won't jump the gun here. I know this deck did get first place. It performed very well, but I'm going to be putting this Altaria deck here in like the top of A tier. Like I said, there might be some spicy takes in this video, but I'm just giving you my honest opinion. Next up, though, is going to be Altaria and Indeedee EX, and this is the deck list that is typically playing Indeedee and Giratina in Mega Altaria, but some decks are playing some of the baby Pokemon like Chingling or Jirachi even alongside Indeedee, so you're playing a mix of like 1 prizers, 2 prizers, and 3 prizers. It's a little bit scary, but Indeedee is an incredibly strong Pokemon, and I think that it really does solve a lot of the issues that Altaria has into some other matchups. 190 HP plus the healing with Indeedee every turn. You can play Giant Capes in the deck. You can actually just play maybe like a copy or 2 of Red or something like that to boost your damage. This is a deck list that actually does fairly well into a more greater variety of decks. Of course, if you're going up against, you know, Blaziken and other rare candy decks, Chingling, of course, going to be really, really strong. Jirachi's going to really be good against other baby Pokemon, but in general, like when you're talking about a lot of the other decks that are probably on the rise so far this season, the Indeedee version of Altaria is exceedingly strong. You can basically heal up the damage that your opponent might be dealing with Greninja, and I think that's definitely pretty decent. So I actually actually really like this deck. This deck actually, I believe, has the highest win rate so far this season at a basically 60% win rate. 223 wins to 141 losses, which is absolutely incredible. Definitely a chunk, a win rate higher, like a good bit win rate higher than the Altaria Jirachi version. The sample sizes are definitely mixed with Altaria, which makes it a little bit difficult to quite frankly judge all of these decks, but I think that this right now is probably the more well-rounded version of Altaria, and I know that it didn't get first place at our tournament, but when I take a look at like Suicune on the rise and various other decks on the rise, I don't know if things like Mega Blaziken are really going to continue to see a ton of play. And while Chingling is definitely a really strong card, you can still play Chingling in this Indeedee deck. So I would say that Altaria in Indeedee is actually also an S tier deck. I'm going to put it up here actually above the Jirachi variant. Some people might not agree with me, but again, we're talking about positioning moving forward, right? This isn't about how good these decks were 2 or 3 days ago. This is how good they will be for the next week or so. And I really think that this Indeedee deck is more well positioned than other versions of Mega Altaria. Next up, though, let's talk about Sylveon and Mega Altaria. And this is, again, the Altaria is so flexible. There's really a bunch of different ways that you can play it. The version here with Sylveon is either seeing play with like Sylveon and Espeon, or they're just playing Sylveon with maybe Giratina or some other cards in the deck. And I don't mind this list really at all because you can play Boosted Evolution Eevee, which has 50 HP. You can still utilize Lycia. But at the end of the day, I just don't really think that Sylveon, even with the draw, is as useful to Mega Altaria than Indeedee is, right? Which I find to be definitely interesting, but, there's a lot of support in the game right now. We have May, we have Lycia, we have Copycat. These are really strong supporter cards that make it so that, when you're playing Mega Altaria as a Stage 1 Pokemon, you don't really need that draw engine. And when you're playing Sylveon, it is nice to move through your deck list, but again, Copycat is a very popular card. So if you're drawing a lot of cards in your hand, a lot of decks are actually also getting buffed by your massive hand size, which is why I'm not actually super confident in Altaria with Sylveon as much as I am the other decks. I think you would rather be a deck that's not piling up cards in your hand. And I think that Sylveon is fine. It's just not as good of a Pokemon as Indeedee is. And I think that if we're playing Mega Altaria, we really do want to play it with other basic Pokemon, and we want to limit how many other evolution Pokemon we're pairing with Altaria. So we're going to go ahead and put Sylveon Altaria here into the B tier. This is actually, I would say, pretty significantly the lowest win rate version of Altaria, which is definitely interesting. But at the end of the day, I think Altaria is just in general a really, really strong card. You can make a case that like both of these Altaria decks are going to be S tier, but I think that the rise of Greninja and Suicune, I should say the reemergence of Suicune and Greninja is definitely going to make the lower HP basic Pokemon like Chingling, Jirachi, and those combos with Altaria a little bit less good, where I would rather play sort of the healing version of Altaria with Indeedee EX. So that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. We'll see if we demote Mega Absol or Oricorio, but that's kind of where we're at currently. Next up is going to be Mega Ampharos. We have two different versions of Mega Ampharos, and I think that these are kind of the two ways that people are playing this Pokemon. And I really like Mega Ampharos. I think it has a lot of potential moving forward in the metagame. Going into this first weekend, I really don't think it was that strong. This is a Pokemon that definitely struggles into Mega Blaziken, mostly because you have to deal some extra damage, because you only deal 100 damage per attack with Mega Ampharos. And of course, Mega Blaziken has 210 HP, also probably plays Lily in the list. So Ampharos definitely struggles to 2-hit KO other Mega Pokemon like Blaziken, and that is definitely rough, but it has a really, really great flow to the deck, which is that we can take multiple KOs in one attack and effectively set up to win games, which I really, really like. Decks that are playing baby Pokemon definitely can struggle into Ampharos. It also does hit for weakness on things like Suicune, which is very, very relevant. And even if we're not one-hit KOing a Suicune, because with weakness we're doing 140, what we can do is attack with Mega Ampharos, get it down to like 20 HP, and then Cyrus up a bench Pokemon that we hit before, bring that up into the active, and then attack that, and then likely KO that Suicune on the bench. So I really like Mega Ampharos and its matchups into Suicune. You can also just play red in the deck if you want to one-hit KO Suicune, but I think that the power, the distribution of decks is changing even already, right? I think that Blaziken's going to see a very sharp decline. I think Altaria is on the rise, and I think that Suicune Greninja is on the rise, which is likely going to open up a lot of opportunities for Ampharos decks moving forward. Now, it is a little bit more awkward because the 3 energy attack cost for Mega Ampharos, while not that hard to satisfy, it is a little bit more difficult to set up multiple Ampharoses on your board, right? Where with Blaziken, you can kind of do that. With Ampharos, you can kind of do that. Even Altaria. but with the 3 energy attack cost with Ampharos, it's really difficult to kind of get multiple Ampharoses set up. So I think that we've yet to really figure out the best way to play Ampharos, but the Oricorio version, I think early on was the best way to play it. However, I think moving forward, maybe a more fast-paced, aggressive version with like Pichu and Zeraora might even be better into Suicune, as we know. Oricorio not very good into Greninja. So I'm a little bit on the fence with Ampharos, but I'm going to be putting it with Oricorio here into the B tier. I just don't know if like a slower version of this deck is going to be good in a format moving forward, in a metagame moving forward where Suicune is going to be very popular. However, the more aggressive version of Ampharos, Zeraora, as we know, definitely a decent Pokemon in general into Suicune, which is definitely really good. And then Pichu, allowing us to kind of get that turn 2 Ampharos out on our second turn, which is absolutely incredible, especially into the Suicune matchup. I'm going to be putting Turbo Mega Ampharos actually here into the A tier. It's going to be like a lower A tier deck. Again, doesn't have a lot of results, or, you know, hasn't done a whole lot in the first few days, but I think moving forward has a lot of potential, especially given the fact that Suicune is going to be much more relevant moving forward than it was originally. So that's kind of how I feel about the Ampharos decks, quite frankly. I'm going to be putting him here. Now that I mention it, I will actually be moving Mega Absol down. I have kind of made the executive decision. I'm going to be putting it here in A tier. I think it's a very good deck list, but I think it was a little bit overhyped into this first weekend, mainly just because it was a counter deck to Blaziken. And I don't think that this is a deck that's going to be exceptionally strong, you know, into the second week of this Mega Rising metagame. So we're gonna put Absol here A tier. I jumped the gun a little bit. I apologize, but Mega Absol, we will be demoting it down here to A tier. Which again, A tier decks are not bad decks whatsoever, but we have to separate S tier from A tier, and I think that's appropriate. Next up, let's talk about Blaziken. Okay, this is where things are going to get a little bit controversial, perhaps. I think that Mega Blaziken's very, very strong. I think it's a really, really good Pokemon, and I think the Entei list is good, and I think that other versions of Blaziken without Entei, as we see here, the Cleffa variant, all good stuff. Blaziken is just, in general, a strong Pokemon. The downside to Blaziken is that the metagame is being shaped around it, right? Even from the very beginning, you know, tons of Oricorio decks we're seeing play. You know, the Water Suicune decks are on the rise. I just don't think the metagame is very kind to Blaziken. Unfortunately, the Entei deck, although, you know, can get around Oricorio, the issue mainly is that we're just not able to really deal with Oricorio quickly, especially, you know, going first leading Entei, you're basically giving your opponent 3 or 4 turns before you're able to do anything to that Oricorio, which definitely doesn't feel very good. It really slows that matchup down in a way that you really don't want to slow it down against Oricorio, and I think that's a big reason why the Entei deck struggled into Mega Absol for sure. Now, when you're not playing Entei, that can fix things a little bit, right? Because Cleffa in the active spot is definitely a little bit more of a easy to work around Pokemon. Even though you might get KO'd early, at least you're not just trapped in the active with an Entei for quite some time. And Cleffa can thin out your deck. You can play, you know, various different Pokemon to counter Oricorio. It's just about being able to get them in the active and KO the Oricorio quickly, right? That's what we really kind of have to do when we're playing Blaziken. So this is a deck list that, no matter really how you build it, the matchup into Oricorio is just a little bit awkward. It doesn't even matter what version of Oricorio it is. So again, Entei Blaziken, the most played deck so far this season. It has a 49% win rate. Again, very heavily counterplayed early on. It was sort of that top dog early on in the metagame, and then sort of the counter meta developed around it, which is why I think the win rate is definitely a little bit lower for this deck list. But I think it's still a quality deck. Again, we're talking its position in the metagame, how much we would recommend it right now. My Blaziken stocks are definitely on the decline. Not to say that it's not a good deck. It's just not a very, you know, the metagame isn't very kind to it, right? So we're going to be putting Mega Blaziken and Entei into the B tier. I'm going to be putting it just like right here, B tier. I think it's totally fine deck. Definitely not a bad deck list whatsoever. But again, just really struggling with that Oricorio plus the rise of the water decks. And the next up is going to be Blaziken with Cleffa. So this is just, you know, traditional Mega Blaziken, but without Entei, and we're playing Cleffa. I think is typically how people are building this list. Sometimes they're playing, you know, another fire type basic attacking Pokemon to get around Oricorio, or they're playing the non-EX Blaziken, which can one-hit KO Oricorio, right? So definitely not a bad deck list here. I do kind of like this structure for the stage 2, you know, EX Pokemon or Mega Pokemon, but mainly just because, you know, I don't know, it's just a little bit more it's a little bit more flexible. But again, you got to keep in mind, Chingling is everywhere. A lot of these Altaria decks are playing Chingling, so rare candy decks are just a little bit scary, which does make this a little bit awkward, right? Because if we can't rare candy, then now we have to play the middle evolution, which means our deck in general is just a little bit slow. We need to also KO Chingling before we can, you know, evolve into the Blaziken, so we need another option. These are all of the factors here here that really limit Blaziken's ability to be super effective in this early meta. Oricorio, Chingling, 2 cards, very common, very not great into Blaziken. However, this Blaziken deck has a 54% win rate without Entei, and I think that's mainly just because its Oricorio matchup is definitely quite a bit better, and we have a little bit more flexibility in the early game. I'm going to be putting this version of Blaziken in the A tier. Very quality deck. It's been doing fairly well recently. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. I like this list a lot, and we're going to keep it A tier. I think that Blaziken is just a strong deck list. In fact, we have one of like all of these megas here in A tier because honestly, the metagame is the mega Pokemon, right? Like all of the new megas are strong, and they're just some of the strongest decks in the game. We're just kind of waiting to see what the best way to play them is. So yeah, although I do think the Indeedee version of Altaria is absolutely insane. I really do. Next up, let's talk about Suicune Greninja. And in fact, we'll talk about all of the water decks here just kind of bundled up together. The first one we're going to talk about is just classic Suicune Greninja without even accounting for Greninja EX. And this is really the more interesting thing or development currently in the metagame. So when we take a look at the overall data, we do see that Suicune and Greninja in the traditional sense, like without Greninja EX or really any great new additions to the deck list, is fine. But honestly, the data hasn't been showing that overall the deck has been doing very well. And I find that to be interesting because, Narumi, I believe, was in first place at a recent 400 player tournament with Suicune Greninja without Greninja EX, and I think the highest placing Suicune Greninja of our tournament was also not playing Greninja EX, which I think is a lot of confusing a lot of people in terms of how they should be playing Suicune. But I'm just looking at the data, right? Which is to me is like the more valuable piece of information other than just, whatever the highest placing deck was. I always say that all the time. But here's the data. Here's the reality of the actual mathematics, right? So Suicune and Greninja without Greninja EX is it's 207 to 229 win rate, which is a 47% win rate, which isn't very good. I'm not going to lie. However, Suicune and Greninja with at least one copy of Greninja EX in it has a 56.5% win rate, a massive difference, literally a 10% win rate difference. To me, that is staggering, especially given the sample sizes for both of these decks are basically identical. So we'll have to see how this really develops or how this continues on. But I do think that the new Greninja EX makes this deck so strong in more varieties of matchups, right? So maybe the Greninja EX isn't that useful in some matchups, but in other matchups, it's definitely making the deck a little bit crazier. And that Greninja EX card is insane. I mean, to be fair, it's basically like slapping a Celesteela into Suicune Greninja, which is crazy. So it's like an Ultra Beast deck now. You can just pivot however you want. Not only that, but you have 170 HP doing 100 damage, which means that, you're able to live attacks from other Mega Pokemon, which is a really big deal for Suicune. Being able to go like Suicune EX into Greninja EX is a lot to get through, especially with Giant Capes and Iridas. It's a lot of damage. The free retreat stuff is absolutely phenomenal, and we still have space on our bench for just a non-EX Greninja, so it's really not impacting the deck much at all. So the list that we're probably going to pull up here for traditional Suicune Greninja is stuff that you've seen before. Maybe one Oricorio, maybe not. We'll have to see. But I'm going to put this deck here, honestly, I mean, looking at the data, I have to just put it B tier. This might be a too low of a ranking here. Maybe it goes on the rise. Maybe it ends up A tier, but quite frankly, the data here shows me that this deck has struggled. 207 to 229. That is not a great win rate for Suicune and Greninja. However, Suicune with Greninja EX, which to me, I am confident is the better version of it, is operating like one of the best decks in the entire game. In fact, I would honestly say that, playing this deck and testing it myself recently, this might be the best deck in the game. I know people necessarily aren't super excited to be playing Suicune again, but the deck has been buffed. This archetype has been improved by Greninja EX, and we still have Irida, we still have Cyrus, we still have all of the stuff that made this deck so good. But now we have Greninja EX, and we can even slot a May into the deck, which is going to make it even more consistent to find our evolution Pokemon, to find our Greninjas. This is just an insane deck. We still get the draw power from Suicune. We still get sort of the damage, the early game aggression. We get the bench sniping. We get everything. I mean, this deck has literally everything going for it. Given the data, given its results in recent tournaments, I have no choice. I really don't. I have no choice other than to put this deck S tier. I think that Suicune and Greninja EX might be the best deck in the game. Hopefully there's counterplay to this, maybe some of these lightning type decks, but as we've seen, Oricorio is not a counterplay to Greninja. So we have to work around that. We have to understand how are we countering Suicune and Greninja EX. It's very, very difficult to do so. I think Ampharos might have a good chance at that. Maybe things like Jolteon, maybe things like Luxray, which are also on the tier list. We'll cover them in a little bit. But yeah, I think that Suicune and Greninja EX is potentially a top dog. This could be, you know, a tier 0 deck. This format, we have to be prepared for it. I don't know why they did it, but they did it. They buffed the best deck in the game. And I know that right now everybody is infatuated with all of the new mega Pokemon, but I mean, the reality is the reality, and Greninja EX and Suicune is just an absolutely incredible deck. It really is just crazy. So I got to put it S tier. I do. I really do. Next up is going to be Greninja. So, you know, coincidentally, Greninja and Oricorio here is actually the third most played deck so far this metagame, and I think it is honestly one of the best control decks. It's right up there with Absol and Oricorio. And to be fair, I put these decks basically in kind of the same situations. I think that, you know, Greninja and Oricorio, you know, basically does all of the same stuff that it did previously, and I think that, you know, this is a deck list that, you know, can just play the late game, and it can stall for a very long time, especially early on in this metagame. Not many people were really counterplaying Greninja or Oricorio, so they weren't necessarily prepared for it. The win rate is definitely quite good at a 54% win rate. It's got great placements at various different tournaments all weekend. I don't know if I want to give this deck necessarily the S tier slot, but this is, again, the third most played deck so far this metagame. And Suicune is still very, very common. Greninja is still very common. We don't have any hard counters to Greninja still, right? I mean, like, a lot of strong other cards came out, but realistically, what do we have that was added in B1 that counters Greninja? I mean, really nothing, like, to be fair. There's just not much. So I'm going to be putting Greninja and Oricorio here into the A tier. I'm going to be putting it like right up here, middle, high A tier. I think this is a very, very strong choice right now until, of course, we maybe, you know, the metagame really balances or evens out around sort of this Oricorio control stuff. But I think that a lot of the Oricorio stuff is skewed a little bit, just again, based on the fact that so many people were playing, you know, like Entei and Blaziken, which is just not a deck that can deal with Oricorio extremely well. So yeah, Greninja Oricorio, it's going to go right there into the A tier for me. Definitely a very, very quality deck. Next up is Luxray. Luxray's been buffed, and I was massively surprised by Luxray. Another Oricorio deck, another single prize archetype. We've seen this again with like Silvally and Oricorio and Zero Aura. This is effectively kind of the same deck, but instead of Silvally, we're playing the Luxray package. And coincidentally, it's very, very good, and I think it's good for a number of different reasons. Like, we have two different Luxrays now. Both are very strong. One can hit the bench for 120 damage. One can just hit the active for 110 for only 2 energies. We can set it up in one turn with Volkner. The Luxray package is really, really good. In fact, this might be the premier, if not like one of the premier, you know, single prize archetype decks in the metagame right now, and I'm really excited about that. It can also, you know, of course, slot Oricorio in very, very easily. So this Luxray deck is the 8th most played deck so far this season. Again, a 55% win rate. I'm really hopeful about this deck because, again, theoretically speaking, we should be very, very good into Greninja Oricorio or just Greninja and Suicune because, again, able to 1-hit KO Greninja on the bench, we're hitting everything for weakness, we're still playing Zero Auras and stuff. I really like this deck. I think that there's just a ton of potential here for Luxray, and to me, I really like that. I like the idea of a single prize lightning archetype that is specifically strong into some of these Suicune decks is going to be a really good thing for the metagame. So you got to keep your eye on Luxray. We still have Volkner. These Luxray Pokemon are really, really good. Like, both of the cards are strong. When I first saw this new Luxray, I didn't really think much of it, but I was like, oh, you know what? Yeah, like that's pretty good. Like, this is a good card. And with weakness, you want to KO Greninja in the active as well, right? So I really like this Luxray deck. I'm really hopeful about it. It's been, you know, operating as good as really any other lightning type deck in the entire game, which is crazy when you think about it. So as far as lightning type decks go, this might be like a top dog this season, which is really, really hopeful. And again, you know, the Suicune Greninja stocks are on the rise, so maybe the Luxray stocks also on the rise. We got to keep that in mind. So also the ability to do 120 to the bench, like, allows you to kind of KO Mega Pokemon pretty easily, right? Like, if you kind of bring in your Oricorio and you get some chip damage off on a Mega, they retreat to the bench, like, it's kind of just GG. We just 120 snipe the bench. Like, that's a lot of damage, oftentimes able to KO a bench Pokemon. Definitely really, really cool. This is just a quality deck. I mean, there's nothing else to say about it. Surprising, but really quality, really well positioned. I'm going to be putting Luxray solidly into the A tier. In fact, I'm going to be putting it just like right here, middle A tier. This is a really good deck. A really, really good deck. I don't have anything else really to say about it. Been performing extremely well, and I think that it's just in general pretty well positioned. Next up is Decidueye. This is a bit of a dark horse here. I wouldn't say like a ton of people playing Decidueye, but what stood out to me was its win rate. And again, I think it's kind of similar to Luxray. I think that, you know, these Pokemon that can deal pretty substantial damage to the bench actually end up being quite strong into the Mega Pokemon. Decidueye EX has a lot of HP, so we're living attacks, we're able to hit the bench. There's really no escaping it, right? I think that a lot of the metagame right now, when you put a Mega Pokemon onto the board, is like, hey, like, am I safe going to the bench on this thing? Like, can I keep this Mega Pokemon on the bench? Do I want to evolve? Do I not want to evolve? Greninja, or not Greninja, but Decidueye is a Pokemon that's like kind of difficult. It's like a weird scenario where I think that just the nature of Decidueye and the 100 damage to the bench, similarly to Luxray, is a very consistent win condition against a lot of Mega Evolution decks. Also, Leaf Cape, the high HP amount, Decidueye uniquely as well is a Pokemon that traditionally is really good into Suicune, which is really, really good, right? Because now Suicune will likely be on the rise here, which I am really hopeful about, right? So something like a Decidueye, even though it's not the most common thing in the metagame, I think has a ton of potential in a format right now that's heavily dominated by Suicune, Greninja, and Mega Pokemon in general. There's also just some Dark-type Pokemon floating around, I believe, that are weak to Grass. And that's a big deal. I think Absol is weak to Grass. I could be totally wrong about that. I'm pretty sure Mega Absol is weak to Grass. It is, yeah. So that's a big deal. I don't know. Decidueye is definitely going to have some inherent things about the deck that make it inconsistent, but I mean, the more I talk about Decidueye, the more I'm kind of talking myself into it. Again, not many people are playing Decidueye. Only a handful of people have played it, but it does so far have a 56% win rate, which, is amongst some of the highest throughout this entire season. So I'm going to be putting Decidueye pretty comfortably. I'm going to put it like top of B tier. This might even be like a low placement for Decidueye because, again, like it just slots into A tier. My confidence in it isn't as high as the other decks just because not many people have been playing it, but keep your eye on Decidueye EX because I think that it is uniquely well positioned in the metagame right now. Next up, we're going to talk about Arceus and Crobat. Another interesting deck that maybe not many people have really thought about, but this deck list popped up recently and it is kind of relevant because it's Arceus with the Arceus Link Crobat to deal extra damage, but you're playing Pichu and Oricorio. So we're basically playing like Turbo Lightning Arceus with Oricorio, but also the Cunning Link or the Arceus Link Crobat. This is an awkward deck to me. I wanted to include it because it's placed pretty well at recent online tournaments. I don't know. Like this isn't something that I've tested personally or really played against, but coincidentally, I mean, some people have played it and it's been doing well. So I wanted to include it on the tier list. I really don't have a lot of other thoughts about the deck. So, if you've played this before, if you have any opinions on it before, like let me know. I mean, I think it did maybe get carried a little bit by Oricorio. Arceus to me seems definitely a little bit sketchy in a metagame with, these mega Pokemon, but Altaria can't KO you, Suicune can't KO you, Absol can't KO you. So really it's like only Blaziken that we're worried about. And I think that Blaziken's on the decline, right? So yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to rank this. I'm just going to put it B tier. If you guys don't agree with that, let me know, but it's just been doing kind of well recently. So I had to put it on the tier list. And because it's been doing well, I can't put it like super low on the tier list. You know what I mean? So it's a weird thing, but yeah, we're going to be putting Arceus here, Turbo Dark Lightning Arceus, whatever this deck is, it's weird, into the B tier. And I think that's probably a fine place for it. Next up, we do have Hitmonchan. Yeah. So, people have been playing Hitmonchan. I'm not particularly like very confident about this deck or very high on it. I don't really know. I think that we're kind of missing the boat here with Hitmonchan. I think that, to be fair, I think we're just kind of waiting for whatever Pokemon is about to come out that we're supposed to play with Hitmonchan, because it definitely feels like we're missing it for whatever the reason. You could play Hitmonchan with Rampardos, which is what this list is, what most people are playing it. But in the same vein, it feels like we're supposed to be playing Hitmonchan with like Fighting Coach Lucario, but that doesn't feel very good to me either, right? So like, it's just a weird deck, I mean, you can't guarantee that you start with Hitmonchan playing Rampardos because it's fossils, but then it just feels weird. And like the 50 damage is like fine, I guess you can KO baby Pokemon, but like like, I don't know. I can't be the only one that it doesn't feel super strongly about Hitmonchan. One of the weirdest Pokemon that we've really gotten, I will say, in this new expansion. And I think a lot of the actual non-EX or non-Mega EX Pokemon that came out in B1 have a lot of potential. I'm just kind of waiting to see which one of those ends up being, that relevant realistically. But I think that 2 prize Pokemon have been definitely, at least the basic 2 prize Pokemon have been nerfed pretty heavily just because, they're able to get KO'd pretty easily and they're worth 2 prizes. So you can't really be too flexible with how they play them. And again, you're playing a 2 prizer with a 1 prizer. So when Hitmonchan goes down, you're really just reliant on a single Rampardos, which if you don't KO, you're getting KO'd. And that doesn't feel very good either. I may be putting Hitmonchan Rampardos, like honestly, I might just put it D tier. No, I'll put it C tier. It's fine. It's like a low C tier deck. I don't think it's like that good. I'll be honest with you. I really don't. I'm not like super confident in it, quite frankly. But yeah, some people are playing it, so we're going to put it on the tier list and, we'll give it some credit, I suppose. Next up, though, we have Hydreigon. Hydreigon is actually one of my favorite Pokemon in the new set, and quite frankly, I think Hydreigon's broken. This card is crazy. I think that when you play this card, you just think to yourself like, wow, this card's horrible. But then you play it, and then some games you're just going turn 2, 130, right? And like, but the way that Hydreigon's ability works is that even if you're going first, you can rare candy on your second turn and attack for 130. So it doesn't care if you go first or second. If you get that Hydreigon out early enough, you kind of just win the game. Like, there's nothing really that can deal with that. It's just too much damage, too much pressure. It's like playing Rampardos if you were able to lead off with that fossil in the active spot, which is effectively broken. So I really like Hydreigon. I think most people are playing Hydreigon right now with like a couple of different Pokemon. The list that we saw that did well at our tournament this past weekend was playing one Cleffa and then one Mega Absol. I think the Mega Absol is really just there for like the late game if we have it available, or if we go second and we lead Absol, you know, we can do some stuff there. But I think that this is a version of the deck that is literally all about Hydreigon, and I think that Hydreigon as a Pokemon is a Pokemon that you can literally build the deck around. And keep in mind, like, this is the 12th most played deck so far this season. It has a 56% win rate, which again is amongst some of the highest in the entire meta right now, 135 to 102. That's a really good record. Hydreigon is legit. This is a really strong Pokemon. And I think as time goes on, it might end up being literally one of the best, decks, or one of the best Pokemon in the entire game. You don't care about Oricorio. We kind of do enough damage to KO just a bunch of Pokemon that like aren't megas, which is really, really cool. And again, just like the ability to attack on your second turn is extremely relevant, right? And it's a Pokemon that feels to me is like really, really strong or really, really bad, but like more often than not, it's going to do something. And that's not really something you ever really want to deal with. The cool thing about Hydreigon as well is that you can set up the single Hydreigon turn after turn. And yes, you deal damage every time you do that effect, but in the meantime, you can actually attach and build up a second Hydreigon on the bench, which is pretty cool. I really like Hydreigon. I think it's kind of slept on, I'm not going to lie. It isn't like, you pair it with Absol, so that's like the archetype, but maybe we don't even play it with Absol. Like, we have to wait and see, I guess. Yeah, man. I mean, Hydreigon is a crazy, crazy Pokemon. I kind of want to put it S tier, but I probably shouldn't, just because it hasn't necessarily done, as much as maybe some of the other, decks so far. Yeah, let's put Hydreigon here. Let's put it like high A tier. Let's put it like right here. I think that's probably an appropriate placement for it. Again, like, these Absol decks are hilarious to me because like Absol's just there and it's just benefiting from two broken Pokemon that kind of carry the deck. But that doesn't mean that Absol's not good. It just means that it's not a Pokemon that's like the core of the deck. It's just like a card that you can pair with other cards to really finish off strategies, which, it does well with Hydreigon and Oricorio. Next up, we've got a couple of Pinsir decks. Let's do both of the Pinsir decks next, because my opinions on Pinsir are a little bit suspect, to be honest. But the thing about Pinsir is that I think that it has way more potential moving forward, since Blaziken will likely be on the heavy decline in terms of how many people are playing it. I think that this opening week, Pinsir struggled. Like, you kind of wanted to play Pinsir with Leafeon, but then you didn't, because Leafeon just gets 1-hit KO'd by Blaziken, and then the game's kind of over because, like, what are we doing? And then, of course, you could play Pinsir with Oricorio and baby Pokemon, which is kind of what maybe the most successful Pinsir decks were this past weekend. But I think that if Blaziken goes down in play, I think that it actually has a lot of potential, possibly decent into other like Oricorio matchups, maybe with like the non-EX Leafeon, but also maybe into Suicune. Maybe it's like a decent deck into Suicune. Traditionally, the grass type decks are good into lightning type decks. So if lightning also rises back up in the metagame, maybe it does well. But again, Absol gets 1-hit KO'd by Pinsir's full damage attack, which is definitely pretty relevant. We're KOing like Hydreigons, things like that. I like Pinsir. I'm not gonna lie, I do, and I kind of feel bad that it struggled really a lot in this opening weekend. But everyone was playing Blaziken, so it really wasn't a great time to play Pinsir. Not that it's a bad Pokemon, it's just that the situation for it was definitely not the best. So we gotta factor that in, and I don't know if that will change. It's just, it kind of seems like it should be better now or in the future than it was the last few days. So Pinsir and Oricorio, this is going to be like the turbo baby Pokemon with Pinsir and Oricorio. I like this list. In fact, it makes a lot of sense. I'm going to be putting this deck here into the B tier, because I think that it's kind of proven, and I think that, Pinsir can take KOs. It's going to be pretty decent into Suicune just because you can 1-hit KO, and I think that's relevant. I like it. I like Pinsir. And like I said, if Fire goes down in play, then, hopefully Pinsir does a little bit better. But I think that Leafeon Pinsir equally is actually quite good. It's like it hasn't done anything yet, and its win rate is really low. Like, this opening weekend, it had like a 40% win rate, which again makes sense. Everyone's playing Blaziken, so I feel for him. I really do. I guess we just also put it B tier, or we maybe even just put it C tier. But it's better. It's way better than Hitmonchan, I would think. But maybe not. You know what I mean? So I guess because it really hasn't done anything yet and it struggled pretty heavily, I'm going to be putting Leafeon Pinsir C tier. But is it really like, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's got to be higher than C tier, but maybe not. We'll put it C tier for now, just based off of its performances. Which again, its win rate is basically the same as Hitmonchan, Rampardos, which is sad to me. Maybe because it's a will deck. Like maybe the thing about will makes it, but like you're doing 80 even if you don't have will and flip heads, right? Which doesn't, and you still have a 50-50 chance without will to flip heads. So it can't be that bad. I don't know. I might be going crazy here. Maybe the Leafeon thing really just struggled. Maybe because Blaziken was just so exceptionally strong into Leafeon. But if we're playing Leaf Capes, we should live in attack anyway. But I guess that is 160 with the burn. So I guess it's probably just not that good. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna put a B tier. I am actually. Because, and the reason for that is because I really think Blaziken's going to go way down in play. And I think that, you know, against things like Altaria, not having like relying on item cards is going to be really good. And I think that Pinsir probably can deal some pretty decent damage into a lot of these other decks as well. But maybe it's also a deck that struggles into Oricorio as well, right? You got to keep in mind because like there's really only like 1 or 2 options in your deck. So yeah, maybe that's a factor as well. We'll have to kind of wait and see how we feel about Pinsir and Leafeon. Do we put it C tier? Sure. We got to put some decks in the C tier, right? So C tier it goes, RIP to Pinsir, but I think it has a lot of potential. So I feel bad about it. Maybe it goes back up in play. Who knows? Maybe Pinsir wins this weekend. Who knows? No idea. But anyway, that's where we're going to put it. Next up is Jolteon and Zeraora. So this is the 9th most played deck. So like Jolteon is kind of seeing play in the typical like Zeraora, you know, Oricorio Pikachu package, right? It's kind of being thrown in with that Pikachu toolbox deck that we saw in previous metagames. I think Jolteon is a fine Pokemon, and I think maybe it has a lot of potential given, you know, Blaziken might be going down in play, which is definitely pretty good. This is a deck to me that should be good into like the Suicune water type decks. And it also should be pretty decent into maybe Altaria as well, but I could be totally wrong about that. Again, typically Lightning decks struggle with grass. There's not a ton of grass in the metagame. Like it's hard for me to really put my nail on this deck. If we take a look at its win rate this weekend, or you know, since the metagame came out, it has a 48% win rate, which is definitely pretty lackluster. I'm taking a look at its win rates now. It kind of struggles pretty heavily into Blaziken, which is unfortunate for being a Lightning type deck, struggling into Blaziken, and yeah, it's kind of just not really doing well against most things, unfortunately, which I guess is probably a big reason why Jolteon might be struggling, right? You do get 1 KO'd by a 2 energy Blaziken EX, so, but again, Blaziken's on the decline. You know, the more I think about Jolteon, I think it's definitely not a bad deck list. I'm going to be just putting it C tier. Maybe its positioning definitely improves, but, you know, given the current state of the game and what it's done and how much it's proven itself, it really hasn't shown itself to be that quality of an option. Again, like there's a lot of strong Lightning type decks. Like we have Luxray, even like the Oricorio stuff with Absol, Greninja, Ampharos has been doing pretty well. And then as we see at the end of the tier list, Silvally, Zeraora, and Oricorio, like that's a deck that has been dominating. So when I look at a deck like this and I see that it really hasn't done much, it's like, why would we be playing this Pokemon? Why would we be playing this deck, you know, in the meta right now, you know, given the other options, right? So that's really what it's all about. You know, if a deck is on the tier list, it's in the meta right now. So like everything that we're talking about are like somewhat quality decks in the metagame. It's just kind of interesting to me that Jolteon really has struggled the way it has. So I'm going to just put it C tier there. If you disagree, I apologize. But all of the data shows that, I mean, it really has struggled. I mean, like there's nothing else we can say about it. Your own personal experiences might be different, but I'm just looking at the data. I'm looking at the actual results and the information provided to us throughout this week of competition. Next up, let's talk about Poison Guzzlord. This is probably the deck that most people just don't understand or don't have their eye on. But this is, again, a smaller sample size, but this deck has a 59% win rate so far. So I think it's a combo of like, you know, Guzzlord being able to live one at KOs, but also Naganadel being a really aggressive, fast-paced Pokemon. And going first, you can actually deal 50 damage on your second turn, plus whatever poison damage you might be dealing. So Nihilego, or Naganadel rather, not Nihilego, but Naganadel is a really strong Pokemon in this current meta landscape, which I really do like. I think that its potential to just effectively kind of deal with Oricorio very well, but also deal with a lot of these basic Pokemon that are looking to evolve into their mega variants really well. Like that actually lends just really strongly to a deck list like this. So I think that Poison Aggro Guzzlord is actually back on the map. I don't know if it'll really catch on. I don't know if like that many people are going to play it, but I do really like this deck list, and its win rate is exceptionally high. Again, not many people have played it, so people might be like, really, you're putting Guzzlord, Poison Guzzlord, like high up on the tier list? But I mean, to be fair, like it's doing well. It's a really strong choice. So So again, it might not be something people are that interested in playing, but given its results and I think given its position against what other decks are seeing play in the metagame, we have to give it a lot of credit. You know what I mean? We have to, you know, we have to like, you know, we gotta put it properly on the tier list. So I'm gonna be putting it A tier. I'm gonna be putting it like a lower A tier spot. I'm gonna be putting it like right here, above Ampharos and Blaziken. I think it's just actually quite good. I really do. Do we have hot takes in this tier list? What do you guys think? Are you guys surprised here? I don't know. I'm just going off of like what's happened so far. You know what I mean? Early metagame tier lists are always a little bit crazy, but anyway, next up, let's talk about Charizard, Genetic Apex Charizard. Oh man, I knew people would try to play this deck list. I wasn't super confident that it would do well, but theoretically speaking, I think the deck has been buffed. But again, like in a meta right now that was like very heavily dominated by Mega Blaziken, I just don't know why you would ever choose to play this deck, which can't even 1 KO Mega Blaziken, right? So Moltres gets KO'd without Giant Cape from Mega Blaziken, and then Charizard, if it is set up, can't even 1 KO. So it just sort of ends up being a really awkward strategy. And I think that this is a deck list here that I don't hate. I don't like, given everything else that we have available to us, I can't justify any reason to be playing this deck list. There's just too many steps. It's just too awkward. You're playing a stage 2 Pokemon. You got to flip heads with Misty's, or not Misty, but with Moltres. And then, you know, you have Fire Patches, sure. Like you have May, sure. Like those are upgrades to the deck, but we're not playing any particular draw engine, which, you know, and there's just too much kind of in the way of this deck really, you know, doing what it wants to do. It's just been power crept. I mean, look at all of the other stuff in the metagame. Are we really playing, you know, Charizard, Moltres? I mean, some people are. The win rate is 38%. So again, literally, I think the lowest out of any of the most played decks so far. I think the only deck with a lower win rate than this is potentially, no, actually, this is it. This is the this is the lowest win rate deck out of anything that's seen play. So unfortunately, Charizard, Moltres going D tier. Rest in peace. Just maybe don't, you know, that's my recommendation. Just maybe don't, you know, it's kind of crazy to say that, but yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Speaking of low win rates, let's talk about Gyarados and Mantyke. Yeah, so I think Mega Gyarados here is not a bad Pokemon, but it's just, it struggles into this current meta. Tons of Lightning, tons of Oricorio, tons of Pokemon that are just living attacks from Gyarados. So it's like, why are we really playing this Pokemon? The difficulty with Gyarados is that there's nothing really to pair with it on the front line that can put pressure on your opponent and force them into their Mega before you go into your Mega Pokemon, right? So if you're playing Gyarados, you really almost always only have one Gyarados set up. Like I was saying before the card came out, that potentially if you get Gyarados out on like your second or third turn, you can't discard important cards from your opponent's deck and then win the game that way. That is kind of the win condition for Gyarados right now. But, you know, given the way that the metagame is developing, if your Gyarados comes in, takes a KO, and then your opponent comes in with their Mega whatever, they're just set to 2-hit KO you. And then unless we can somehow survive and 2-hit KO them back, it's just not really going that well. So potentially like with Giant Cape or, you know, the new helmet that you know, subtracts damage by 20 plus Irida, like potentially we can live 2 attacks, but most of the time like Altaria, Blaziken, and even like non-mega Pokemon are just 2-hit KOing you, which is a really you know, it's a recipe for disaster when you're playing Gyarados. It's also just not a guarantee that this thing gets enough energies in time, which is why we have to play it with Mantyke and Misty and things like that. It's really strong. Like Gyarados is a Pokemon that's going to be really good into potentially Suicune, potentially really good into like something like a Giratina Darkrai or Arceus that are, you know, might, if they were, you know, seeing play. But those decks really aren't seeing play. It's all these mega Pokemon with high HP amounts, right? So that's really what it comes down to. Gyarados is just lacking a real proper Pokemon that can pair with it on the front line. You know what I mean? There's just no way to like set up a Pokemon, use it in the active, and then set up your Gyarados on the back line. You just gotta, you have to fully commit to the Gyarados, which inherently makes it so that it struggles, right? So, I mean, it's not that bad, I guess. We'll put it C tier. I think it's better than Charizard, that's for sure. I'm going to put it C tier right here above Hitmonchan and Rampardos. Like, it's just, I think, a mega Pokemon that is struggling to go up against the other mega Pokemon. And I think that's really what it comes down to there for Gyarados, which, you know, rest in peace to my boy there. But, yeah, just not a deck that's necessarily very good into, you know, the other Pokemon, or the other decks, you know, in the metagame. Next up, though, we've got Giratina Darkrai. Yeah, we've got Giratina Darkrai, and, you know, I wanted to put it on the tier list mainly just because I wanted to let people know, like, my thoughts on it. I know it's kind of a meme, like, Giratina Darkrai is dead. I think it has the potential to come back into the metagame, especially, like, if Suicune is dominating. It's a deck list that can deal, like, with Suicune kind of okay. But again, hopefully people just stop playing Giratina Darkrai because one, I think it's just had its time, and I think that it's ready. It's ready to go. Like we're moving on, I think. Giratina Darkrai, the 23rd most played deck so far this season, and it has a 42% win rate. So it has not been doing very well. It's struggling against a lot of the other megas like we thought it would. It's just a slow deck. It doesn't want to KO it mostly any of the new megas, and it gets KO'd pretty easily. So that's the inherent downside to this deck list. I really don't think it's horrible. I just think that at this point, it's not good enough, and people are just tired of it. So it'll likely fall out of play, but maybe it rises back up, right? With Suicune kind of coming back into the metagame. So I'm going to be putting Giratina Darkrai, D tier. Rest in peace. Actually, nah, I'm just going to put it C tier because it's really not a D tier deck. Like it is still Giratina Darkrai. It's better than Charizard. I'll tell you that much. 42% win rate is fine. I think it's probably right there with these other decks in C tier. People are going to think I'm disrespecting Jolteon, and maybe I am, but I mean, the deck literally hasn't done anything. So, I can't really rank it that much higher. Maybe it goes B tier, I guess, but we'll just keep it C tier for now. We'll make all of the people mad at me, which is totally fine. Lastly, we have Sylveon Oricorio, which to me is also a really, really strong deck. The win rate overall for this deck is about 50-50. But truthfully, I think that Sylveon is a really good Pokemon in a mega dominated metagame, right? And I think 50-50 makes a ton of sense for Sylveon, mainly just because if you go second, it's probably enough pressure to win games even against mega decks. But if we go first, a lot of the decks in the game right now are just going to kind of outpace you, right? And I think that's really the nature of Sylveon is that, if we're going first, it's really not that strong. If we're going second, it is strong. Technically, you can have Pichu in the active and you can still attack on your second turn, but baby Pokemon definitely a big liability in the metagame right now. Oricorio not going to be very valuable into Suicune Greninja, and Sylveon itself can be pretty decent, but I don't have the utmost confidence, in the rest of the deck. So I think that this is definitely not a bad deck in the metagame right now. I am going to give this just a solid B tier placement. There was one player that went 10-1 with Sylveon Zero Aura at our tournament, but overall it's been pretty average. So I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put it right here, just kind of in the middle of B tier, and that's where it's gonna be. It's just gonna hang out right there. Definitely a decent deck so far this season. And that's it, guys. That is the tier list. Comment down below what you guys think. I know some people might not agree with everything on here. To be fair, I think that it's just that it's so early. We don't have a great understanding of maybe what's going to end up the top decks. But the way that I'm looking at everything right now and the given results and how things are trending, I think that Altaria will probably still remain as a top deck. But I think that it's going to be the Indeedee variant that kind of can continue on, given the changes in the metagame right now. Again, I think Chingling is fine, but it's probably going to struggle moving forward. I think Jirachi also going to struggle moving forward. And I think that Suicune and Greninja really is probably still a top deck, if not the top deck. So unless we really see some counterplay develop around it, it will likely kind of continue to dominate the metagame. And everything else in the A tier are incredible decks. I mean, everything A tier is super, super good. These are all decks that can just pop off and win a tournament at any time, and I would not be surprised. Even the decks in B tier, I would not be shocked at all to see them win a tournament, to be fair. So A tier and B tier, the differences are very, very slight. In fact, even S tier, all of these decks B tier and above, I think are extremely quality. And I would definitely not be surprised if any of them ended up, being at the top of the metagame a week from now, right? And I'm sure the tier list will change a lot as we go into the next week or so. This is just sort of my early understanding, but things are changing so much. They're developing so quickly. It's really hard to get a really great read on it. So these are just kind of my early opinions. Keep that in mind. The difference between S tier, A tier, and B tier is about as slim as it ever will be on this tier list, but based around its current results, I think that's how we're kind of separating these decks. So I'm really excited. I mean, basically this entire tier list is new deck lists, and I think the metagame is completely new, very, very fresh, very exciting. And I'm very curious to see what decks do well in tournaments throughout the rest of this week. And then, of course, at Pocket Mats Pocket Tournament number 7 this weekend, which, again, sponsored by Box.gg. Register down, the link down in the description below. It's going to be a great event. I'm really excited for it. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. Overall, keep your eye on Suicune Greninja. It is probably still the top deck in the game right now, if not one of them, and hopefully there's 2 or 3 other decks that can kind of contend with it at the top, but it really does have everything going for it. I think Oricorio is really, really good, but I don't really love any of the Oricorio decks in terms of S tier placements right now, mainly just because I think Greninja is on the rise, but everything A tier, absolutely incredible. Everything B tier, also really good. really good B tier here this week. C tier, the C tier decks are things that really I don't feel super confident about like moving forward. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I think there's like either better options or these are decks that, you know, just don't like have enough going for them given the current meta landscape. And then D tier, I put Charizard down here because this is the deck that people are playing that really is probably the worst deck out of all of the decks that, you know, people are commonly playing. So there you go. Shout out to Luxray, by the way. Keep your eye on Luxray. Keep your eye on Hydreigon. Keep your eye on anything Altaria, as well as Blaziken. I want to see how Blaziken performs in the upcoming week. Maybe it'll continue to see play. I'm just not very confident in it. I'll be entirely honest with you. But anyway, guys, there you go. Thanks so much for watching. The support has been incredible. We're almost at 40,000 subscribers, which is really cool. Help me get there. The community is growing. Go join the Discord. We have over 3,000 people in the Discord. It's been popping off with trades in the tournaments. It's a really great time to be playing Pokemon Pocket, and I appreciate all of the support on the content. So comment down below what you guys think here. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Please let me know. Again, I totally don't mind, you know, you guys thinking otherwise. I'll be honest with you. So yeah. There's the tier list, the first tier list. I'll do another one next week as things change and develop. I'm really excited. The Emblem event should be coming up here in the next few days, and that'll run for about a week or two. And then, you know, ranked will be at the end of the month. It'll start back up. And that's really where we'll get into some more ranked content. But for now, it's all like tournament meta stuff. And, you know, we're all kind of waiting for that to come out. So here's my tier list. Let me know what you guys think. We'll see you guys later. Peace out. Have a good one. And yeah. Bye.